magnetic fields around the circles. And you can see videos online of people going into these crop circles. Their hands start to get red. Things are happening to them.
AI just decoded a crop circle cipher, and the message doesn't make sense. Not to the scientists, not to the engineers who built the system. And after what you're about to hear, it won't fully make sense to you either. The most advanced pattern recognition AI ever built was fed thousands of symbols, ancient scripts, mathematical structures,
Microscopic metallic spheroids in around the circles.
It decoded all of it without blinking. Then it hit a crop circle. It didn't crash. It didn't malfunction. It decoded the structure perfectly, and then flagged the message inside as something that does not belong to any known category of human or natural origin. Whatever this thing is saying, it is saying it in a language we have never seen before. And that is where this story gets very uncomfortable, very fast. What the machine actually found. Before we go anywhere else, you need to understand one thing clearly, because the title of this video says the AI decoded a cipher, and that is true, but here is the part nobody is explaining correctly. The AI did not decode the message, it decoded the existence of a message. That distinction is not a technicality, it is the entire point, and it is the reason the researchers who ran this experiment have not been able to fully sleep since.
These are complex geometric designs that would have taken people weeks to map out.
Because finding out that something is trying to communicate is not the same as understanding what it is saying. One of those things is exciting. The other one, the one that happened here, is something closer to dread. We will come back to this distinction. It matters more at the midpoint of this story than it does right now. For now, let's go back to how this lab got there. The project was called, in its official documentation, a Neural Pattern Recognition Initiative. The goal was to build a machine that could look at any human or natural visual pattern and understand it. Not just recognize it, but categorize it, extract its logic, and place it inside the correct framework of meaning. To train the system, the team assembled a data set unlike anything built before. Ancient symbols from the Mayan civilization, intricate geometric designs from Tibetan mandalas, detailed architectural blueprints of Gothic cathedrals, high-resolution scientific visualizations, including NASA's orbital telemetry data, thousands of examples of complex human art reaching back across 5,000 years of recorded history.
No footprints leading up to it. There's no roads, no machinery, no evidence of any use of any kind of machinery.
By the end of training, there was effectively no human visual pattern the system had not encountered, and in early testing, it proved it. Feed it any image, and within milliseconds, it would return a confident classification. Every test passed. Every result was clean and logical. The researchers were pleased, starting to believe this might be the cleanest project any of them had ever run. This is exactly where the story breaks open. The alarm. Nobody recognized one afternoon. Not a planned experiment, not a scheduled test. A few researchers thought it might be amusing, just to see, just for a moment of curiosity in a long week. They pulled a handful of crop circle images off the internet and dropped them into the test queue. Nobody told the rest of the team. The mood was light. Someone in the room said, "Let's see if it calls it a prank." The first image went in. The AI began processing, and immediately something felt different. Where the system usually returned results in under a second, this time it paused. Not long, but enough that 2 or 3 people looked up from what they were doing. A second image went in, then a third, and then, for the first time in the entire history of this project, a warning signal appeared on the monitoring screen that no one in the room had ever seen before. Algorithmic entropy spike. That signal was not part of normal operations. It was a deep system alert, the kind that was built into the architecture specifically for one scenario, encountering data so structurally outside the boundaries of the training set that the system could not fit it into any known framework. It was, in the plainest possible terms, a digital alarm that the machine triggers when it is looking at something it cannot make sense of. The room went quiet for real this time. Because here is what you need to understand about how AI systems like this one actually work. They do not get confused easily. They are built specifically to handle uncertainty, to make the most reasonable guess even when the data is incomplete or ambiguous. Show a well-trained system something it has never seen, and it finds the nearest category and returns a result with a confidence score. That is the design. That is what it always does. But this system was not doing that. The entropy spikes kept coming, one after another. And when the team loaded more images, over a dozen crop circle photographs fed in sequence, the system's behavior shifted into something that none of them had a name for. It was as if the machine had pressed itself against an invisible wall, and nobody was laughing anymore. Uncategorizable. Let's be precise about what was actually happening, because this is the part that sounds like it could be a technical glitch until you understand why it wasn't. The AI was not struggling because the images were low quality. These were high-resolution aerial photographs, sharp, detailed, unambiguous. And the patterns in those photographs had every single quality the system was designed to recognize and work with. Perfect symmetry, yes. Clear geometric structure, yes. Measurable repetition and layered complexity, yes. Mathematical precision at a level that matched or exceeded anything in the training set, yes. Every measurable feature was present. Every condition for categorization was met. And yet the system looked at all of it and returned the same answer with complete consistency every single time. This does not belong to any known category. Red and yellow alerts began flashing across the monitoring screens. The system displayed status messages the team had never programmed it to produce. And then, finally, the word that stopped everything. Uncategorizable. No one in the lab had ever seen that word on a screen before. This system was not designed to give up. It was not designed to say, I don't know. It was built to return something. At minimum, a closest approximation, a fallback, a guess? There was no guess. And here's the part that was truly disturbing. And this is where it stopped being a side experiment and became something none of them could walk away from. If the AI had been genuinely confused, you would see it in the data. Confused systems produce erratic results, wrong guesses, inconsistent classifications, the kind of noise you get when a machine is flailing. But this system was not producing noise. It was producing the exact same result with total clarity and total consistency for every single image. What it was saying, in the only language a machine has, was this: I can see the structure. I can confirm that something is here. But whatever made this was not part of the world I was trained to understand. No one had written that response. The system had arrived at it entirely on its own. If you are watching this and thinking, that cannot be right, there has to be an explanation, stay with this. Because what the team discovered next is precisely why there isn't one. Make sure you subscribe now and hit the bell, because what comes next in this story is the part that no one in that lab has been able to explain publicly. And we are going to go through all of it. The interference pattern. After the initial shock, the team did what researchers do. They pulled back, ran the data again, isolated the specific images that had triggered the strongest warning concentrations, and began a controlled, deep analysis. One image kept coming back to the top of the list. The same formation over and over, producing the highest density of alerts. They isolated it and zoomed in. And here's what nobody expected. The design did not look like a drawing. It looked like physics. More specifically, it looked exactly like an interference pattern, the kind of visual phenomenon that appears when two or more waves collide. Think about what happens when you drop two stones into still water at the same moment. Where the ripples meet, they generate layered, overlapping regions of peaks and troughs. Physicists can map those patterns mathematically. They are precise, predictable, and absolutely not the kind of thing a person draws in a field at night with wooden boards and ropes. This crop circle's internal geometry matched those patterns almost exactly. The AI detected this without being told to look for it. The moment it did, the system stopped treating the formation like an image and began treating it like a signal, dropping into the processing mode it normally uses for encrypted data, searching for hidden structure and deliberately concealed information. So the researchers followed that thread. They attempted to decode it. Binary patterns? Nothing. Known. Encryption formats? Nothing. Any recognizable signal architecture? Nothing. The pattern was behaving like data, but there was no data that could be extracted. If this is not a signal, why is the most advanced pattern recognition system ever built treating it like one? The team had no answer, but Dr. Elena Krabsov was about to push this somewhere none of them had expected to go. The compression test. It was well after midnight when Dr. Elena Krabsov sat down at the analysis workstation alone. She had sent the rest of the team home. She had been doing this long enough to know that some results need to land without an audience before you can trust your own reaction to them. Dr. Elena was the lead data analyst on the project. She was known for one specific quality. She did not dismiss strange data. Where others saw an anomaly to be explained away, she saw a question that had not yet been asked correctly. Her approach that night was deceptively simple: a compression test. When you compress a digital file, the system removes redundant information. Simple patterns compress dramatically. Complex patterns compress less, but they always compress. Every digital file ever created has obeyed this rule. She ran the algorithm on the isolated crop circle image. The file got larger. She stared at the screen, set down the coffee she had been holding, then ran it again. Larger. She switched to a different compression algorithm. Larger. She moved to a second workstation and ran it fresh from the original file. Larger. Every time. What Dr. Elena was looking at and what she later said made the room feel like it had shifted on its axis, was a pattern so densely layered with non-redundant complexity that the compression system could not find a single element to remove. Instead, in attempting to process it, the system had to generate additional information just to keep up with what was already there. She compared this to two known systems: cryptographic ciphers, where simple surfaces conceal enormous encoded layers, and DNA, where a compact molecule unfolds into incomprehensible complexity when decoded. But here is where it went beyond both. In ciphers, we know the underlying logic. In DNA, we understand the encoding architecture. There is always a known framework beneath the surface. In this crop circle, there was no known framework, no recognizable logic, no familiar architecture, and still the structure was there, consistent, expanding, deeper than anything the team's systems could fully map. That was the part that kept Dr. Elena at the workstation until morning. Not the result itself, the implication of it. But that wasn't even the part that kept the rest of them up at night. Something built this. By the time Dr. Elena briefed the full team the following morning, the atmosphere in the lab had changed. These were not dramatic people. These were data scientists and engineers. People who spent their professional lives finding prosaic explanations for things that looked mysterious. And they could not find one here. The AI was not flagging these patterns as unknown in the way it flags noise or corrupted data. It was flagging them the same way it flags things that are suspicious. The same warning architecture used to detect forged currency. The same signals used to identify deepfake content. The same alerts fired at deliberately obfuscated encryption. These were the flags for intentional design. The system was not saying, "This looks random and I cannot categorize it." It was saying, "This looks deliberately constructed and I still cannot categorize it." That distinction is everything. Random things, natural formations, known human designs. The system had processed all of those without pause. Whatever this was, it was none of those things. And this is when the idea appeared for the first time, quietly. What if this is not a pattern? What if this is a message? The nervous laughter lasted about 30 seconds. Then the data on the screen made it stop. The field. The team reached the field at dawn, while the light was still low and the air had not yet warmed. The formation looked unremarkable from the perimeter, a large circular shape pressed into a wheat crop, the kind of thing you have probably seen in photographs 100 times. Walking to the edge of it was one thing. Stepping inside it was something else entirely. The scale was the first thing that hit them. From aerial images, the geometry had looked intricate but contained. Standing inside it, surrounded by the pattern on all sides, extending further than felt reasonable, the formation was enormous. The kind of scale that makes you aware of how small you are in relation to whatever made it. The silence was the second thing. No wind, no movement. The wheat at the boundary of the formation swayed in a light morning breeze. Inside it, nothing moved. And then they looked at the plants themselves. And get this, the wheat was not simply pressed down. Each stem had been bent at almost exactly a 90-degree angle. Not broken, not dried out, not damaged in any way that a plant bent by force should be. Alive, green, the cellular structure intact. The kind of fold you would see if someone had applied pressure with extraordinary gentleness, at a precise angle, with consistent force, across every single plant in a formation covering an area the size of several basketball courts. The plants had been woven, one stem layered over another, a third folded across both, an interlocking structure that, when they crouched down and examined it closely, looked like nothing so much as deliberate craft. The team spread across the surrounding area and searched for any physical evidence of how this had been made. Footprints? None. Tire marks? None. Tool drag marks in the soil? None. No compression at the outer edge? No entry or exit channel through the surrounding crop? This is where it stopped being a field investigation and became something harder to name. Because what they were looking at required two things simultaneously: extraordinary geometric precision across an enormous area, and absolutely zero physical evidence that anyone had been present to create it. One of those things could be explained, not both. The soil told its own story. Samples collected from inside the formation showed, in certain areas, crystal formations. Tiny particles fused into crystalline structures of the kind that require intense, concentrated heat or energy exposure to produce. Under normal agricultural conditions, in undisturbed topsoil, this does not happen. Certainly not overnight. Then the discovery of metallic microspheres. Extremely small, perfectly spherical particles of metal of the kind that form when material is subjected to heat intense enough to liquefy it. The droplets go airborne, cool rapidly, and solidify into perfect spheres before reaching the ground. They are found at lightning strike sites. They are found near certain meteorite impact zones. They are found in areas exposed to high-energy electromagnetic events. They are not found in agricultural fields. The magnetic alignment tests confirmed what the team was already beginning to suspect. In specific areas inside the formation, the orientation of the magnetic field in the soil had shifted. Particles had aligned themselves in a particular direction. the signature of an external force that had influenced the local electromagnetic environment. There were no power lines near this field, no transmission towers, no military equipment, no known source of electromagnetic energy anywhere in the surrounding area. Something had been here, and it had left nothing behind except the evidence of what it did. The full data set. This is where it stopped being a single anomaly and became something systematic. The team assembled over 200 high-resolution aerial images of crop circle formations from across the world. Different countries, different decades, ranging from simple to extraordinarily complex, and fed the entire collection into the AI system simultaneously. This was no longer a side experiment born of afternoon curiosity. This was a full-scale, properly structured analysis. The results began coming in, and here's what nobody expected. For many formations, the simpler ones, the AI found exactly what you would expect. Fibonacci spirals, basic geometric constructions, in some cases, Penrose tiling, sophisticated and beautiful, but a known mathematical structure that human designers use intentionally. The system categorized these without hesitation. Human-made design confirmed. Moving on. But as the analysis reached the most complex formations in the dataset, roughly a third of the total, the behavior changed. This is the moment the entire investigation turned. The system did not just slow down or produce lower confidence results. It did something that should not have been possible. It generated a new classification that nobody on the team had programmed it to create. It appeared on the screen without warning. A tag the system had constructed for itself in real time to hold the data it could not place anywhere in its existing architecture. The team stood around the monitoring station and read it. Nobody spoke. Then someone said quietly, "Did we program that?" They had not. They checked the logs. 4 different people independently. The system had generated that classification autonomously. It had looked at a subset of the data, determined that none of its existing categories were adequate, and created a new one. An unprogrammed self-classification from a system that was not designed to do that. The room's reaction was not excitement. It was the specific silence that comes when something has fundamentally changed, and everyone present knows it, but nobody is ready to say it out loud. Think about what this meant. They had built this system to classify, trained it extensively, tested it against thousands of patterns from across human history, and a subset of formations from a wheat field had pushed it to the edge of its own architecture and forced it to reach beyond. Not human-made, not natural, not any known mathematical structure, not abstract art, not any category that existed when the morning began. Something else, and the AI had named it in its own terms without being asked. Structural fingerprints. And here's what nobody expected from the broader dataset analysis. When the AI examined all 200 formations, the researchers anticipated finding a collection of largely unrelated patterns. Some simple, some complex, each one a standalone event from a specific location and time. That is not what the analysis returned. The system began identifying structural fingerprints, specific design elements, arc ratios, symmetry configurations, and geometric proportions that appeared repeatedly across formations, separated by thousands of miles and decades of time. Not similar, not visually comparable, mathematically identical. This was not a coincidence. The team ran probability calculations on the likelihood of these repetitions occurring by chance. The numbers were not close. The most striking case came when the AI flagged 2 formations, one from Europe, one from South America, separated by several years. On the surface, entirely different designs. But when the AI compared their internal geometry, the arc ratios, the symmetry proportions, the relationship between the central structure and the outer formations, they were not similar. They were the same. One was a 180-degree rotation of the other, the same blueprint, a different orientation, a different continent, a different decade. The team then looked at the timeline of the full data set in sequence, earliest formations to most recent. The pattern that emerged from that analysis is the one that none of them have been comfortable discussing since. The earliest formations, from the 1970s and early 1980s, were simple: basic circles, straight geometric lines, elementary bilateral symmetry, the kind of design that sits at the threshold of what a small group of people with basic equipment could produce overnight. But as the years progressed, the formations grew more complex, then significantly more complex, then complex in ways that require modern computing to fully map. Fractals, mathematical ratios that appear in advanced physics, geometric structures encoding information in multiple simultaneous layers. It looked like escalation, like something had begun with signals calibrated to the limits of what the era could receive, and had been incrementally upgrading ever since, testing the range, expanding the vocabulary, watching to see whether anyone on the other end was developing the tools to listen. And here is the part that sits with you. The AI decoded the presence of a message in these structures. What it could not decode, what it generated that third unprogrammed category specifically to hold, was the message itself. The cipher exists. The cipher has been confirmed. The content of the cipher remains beyond the reach of the most sophisticated pattern recognition system ever built. That is the paradox this video promised. And it is real. The human cognition link. The final stage of the investigation produced its most unsettling data. A selection of the most complex formations, specifically the ones that had triggered the AI's strongest uncategorizable responses, were shown to human subjects while their brain activity was monitored in detail. The results surprised even the researchers, who by this point believed they had already absorbed every surprise this investigation had to offer. Certain designs were simultaneously activating regions of the brain associated with deep pattern recognition and emotional response. Not one or the other, both at the same time, in the same subjects, with consistent intensity. Not visual processing alone, not analytical cognition alone, something operating below the level of conscious interpretation in the architecture of the mind that processes meaning before language can form around it. The AI named this phenomenon neurosymbolic messaging, a form of information transfer that does not operate through language or sequential logic, but through pattern and structure, delivered directly to the parts of the human mind that recognize meaning before they can articulate what they are recognizing. Think about what that would mean if it is real. A language that requires no translation, a signal that bypasses every cultural barrier, every linguistic framework, every learned interpretive system, and lands directly in the cognitive hardware that all human beings share. If such a language existed, it would not look like writing. It would not look like code in any form we recognize. It would look like geometry pressed into a field. The data showed, not as theory, but as documented result, that the formations the AI could not categorize were the same formations that activated the deepest simultaneous cognitive and emotional responses in human subjects. The machine reached the edge of its architecture. The human brain responded below the threshold of conscious thought. Something in those patterns, some part of us already recognizes. We do not yet have the language for what we are recognizing, but the response is there, consistent, and it does not look like coincidence. The question that has no answer. The AI decoded the structure, it confirmed the complexity, it identified the consistency across a global dataset, it generated autonomously a new category specifically to hold the formations it could not place anywhere in its existing architecture. It confirmed that whatever is embedded in those patterns operates on a logic that no human-built system can currently map. But it could not identify the source. Is this the work of some intelligence that has been observing us long enough to understand that mathematics is the only language we might eventually share across any conceivable divide? Is it something whose origin we would not recognize even if it were named? Is it a phenomenon with no sender at all? Some unknown property of consciousness or nature that generates structured information through processes we have not yet discovered? The AI's final output on the question of origin was the most honest answer any intelligence, artificial or otherwise, could give. 3 words: insufficient data. Continue. The most sophisticated pattern recognition system ever built looked at this phenomenon and did not close the file. It opened it further. What it is pointing toward, the decoded existence of a cipher whose message we cannot yet read, is not a solved mystery. It is the beginning of one. Whatever is in those fields has been patient, consistent, escalating in complexity in ways that track the development of our own ability to notice it. We just confirmed the cipher is real. We still cannot read it, and that is why this story is not over. If this is the kind of question that stays with you, subscribe and hit the bell. Because we are going to keep following this, and the next chapter is not going to be any easier to explain.